Hey everybody, it's Kelly Justice here with the Philosophy Society. It is September 18th, 2024. It's a Wednesday. We're in the TMU library, room 860. We have been working on some things. Today, we're going to continue the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book. We're going through the 30th anniversary edition. And so today is beginning with the public victory part of the text. And this is Principles of Interpersonal Leadership, Habit 4, Think Win-Win. So this begins, on page 236, and it ends on 271 of this edition. But we're probably not going to get through the whole thing. It's like almost 40 pages, 35 pages, 36 pages. So we're not going to do the whole thing today, but maybe it'll take us at least 2 sessions, maybe even 3 sessions to get through it all, depending on how much discussion we have. It feels good to be this far in the book. I was telling somebody earlier, like when you first start a book, you hold it like this, and then as you get through it, your hand feels the difference, Accomplishment. Yeah, it's like you don't get that with PDFs, Okay, so 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is Habit 4, Think Win-Win. And you can click on this link. I sent the slides to the WhatsApp group. Click on that link to buy the book, just to give respect to the author, almost like a counterbalance for teaching the material. I'm not trying to infringe on their intellectual property. So we have 2 pages of principles here in this chapter. So we'll go through these 2 slides first, and then we'll go straight to the book. That way you can kind of listen to this as a audiobook lecture discussion. So he's committed to the golden rule to memory. Let us now commit it to life. So this is the general perspective on the think win-win, which in some ways he says is the golden rule is like treat others how they would want to be treated or how you would want to be treated, but he changes it and says treat them how they want to be treated. Just so that you're not taking advantage of people. And we could talk about Kant's categorical imperative. Treat every person how you would want to treat them in general, or treat them only as a means, an end in themselves, not a means to an end. So we have the abundance mentality, right? And so sometimes people, he says, this is where we go back to the inside out discussion, where we talk about paradigm shift. The way that people see all interactions is win-lose. And he gives the example of like kids in sports, and they're taught from a young age about competition, that being a winner means that somebody else is the loser, right? And so he says, in some ways, this scarcity mentality or win-lose paradigm is embedded in some people's scripts or their paradigms, right? And so the principle that he's going from, one of these principles is there is plenty for everybody, that one person's success is not achieved at the expense or exclusion of the success of others. So what that means is that everybody can win, right? It's not a zero-sum game. And Robert Wright wrote a book called Non-Zero that's about that, and does like an anthropological analysis of different cultures over time, and the ones that were the most successful engaged in win-win interactions with themselves and with others. Oh, thanks.
But I think it's a good philosophy. But you look at today's world. I mean, how the abundant mentality. Yeah, that's a lot. That's more than enough bread, eggs, good food for everyone, right? But people still, the wars, that happen these days. For that 1 inch of land, so many people's lives sacrificed, kids, children, whatever. So how come they? There's a plenty of food. There's plenty of food for every Russian, every Ukraine. But why? They is it why they still enter into a massive torture, murderer, why?
Well, it's one of the properties is dehumanization in that context. Through the lens of Covey in this chapter, one of the options is win, is that the person just wants to win and they don't have any regard for whether somebody else loses, right? Whereas the other person can win or they can lose, it doesn't matter to them, So
yeah, to extreme, they even say if I lose, I think what's Putin's number 2, Medvedev said if Russia lose, there's no reason for the world to exist. He
Yeah,
even
that's
say that.
craziness. That's insane. That's delusional thinking, right?
Yeah, that's delusional thinking, and then they're threatening using nuclear. So that's not win-win. That's actually blow everything, destroy everything,
Yeah, and it's in some ways a fear tactic, is
Mhm.
trying to scare people, which is one of like the coercive properties of a tyrannical government. They're trying to rule the world through fear, right?
I was just wondering, why they cannot take up this win-win, because they're also human beings. I think there's enough milk, for them every day. Why they have to conquer that land and kill so many people? Why they have to do that?
Yeah, like it becomes pathological in some sense. Like it's not healthy for them, because is it really going to bring about meaning? Like what if you're going to have a realistic view of reality, what kind of an ethical narrative can you create for yourself?
Yeah,
Does it really even make sense?
Right.
And I don't think it can at that level. It can't.
Yeah.
Like how can you, like, again, just going with the categorical imperative, how can you justify
yeah,
realistically,
yeah.
you know?
I mean, at the end of the day, no matter how rich you are, you still sleep in that narrow 3 inches by, I don't know, still that bed. You don't need that many.
Mhm.
You cannot eat lobster every day, or whatever. So I mean, poor lobster. But I'm just saying, why they have to, the doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, but it's not a sense thing. It's almost like from a reptilian brain perspective, like the hierarchy is to, like, that evolutionary instinct that they're doing is inappropriate in this context because it's not necessary for survival. But they're unconscious, if I'm going to use the term, or implicit or instinctual motivation is to just get at the top no matter what. And then once you're at the top, you can create some balance that is usually always in favor of the person at the top. It's not even like it's justice or uniform in some way, right? And so, yeah. And so, like, I think that's why the Philosophy Society is supposed to be one of the examples of things that can give people some skills and practice on how to not let that happen through critical thinking and accurate observation of ourselves and other people, and then try to improve through certain principles of cooperation. For example, think win-win. And I think it starts with yourself and the people that you're in contact with. And then we can try to aim for some sort of a cascading effect or like a ripple effect, right? That if I'm good to you and you're good to somebody else, it'll just keep on going. And I think that there's a quality of information and maybe like an embeddedness, like how well you know it and your ability to apply it. And so that's kind of part of the principle of the Philosophy Society.
Yeah.
Whereas a cult, they want to keep all the information in, and it's deceptive and it's secret and manipulative.
Yeah.
We're actually doing the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Even religious groups,
Yeah. I think that this is great. What you do with the Philosophy Society. I just amazed, or whatever. I don't understand. After thousands of years of lessons, so many people die. I mean, people still haven't learned the lesson that, like they mentioned here. There's enough for everyone.
Yeah.
There's more than enough. Why? You guys can compete in the Olympics, or play some soccer game. Don't just don't just go to the war.
There's other ways to get
Yeah.
for sure. And that's what psychologically, that's what we want to do. And so how can we learn that? Let's just say as regular people in society, and have an emergent phenomena where this tyrannical stuff doesn't occur anymore. That's kind of the thesis. If you have a bunch of mini properties, then something will emerge after the fact. Like a rainbow exists now from a certain perspective, right? So can we have like a sense of harmony with people if every individual,
Especially your neighbors,
yeah, well, it starts
neighbor
with you,
country.
Yeah.
and then the ones you're interacting with, right? Okay, so next point here, unexpressed feelings never die. They're buried alive and come forth later in uglier ways. And he gives the example of psychosomatic illnesses. So he just kind of says that, like, if you feel something, it's not good to be passive, because then you can kind of blow up at people in the wrong way. Whereas if you're assertive and you talk about what's good for you, right, then you can you won't have this emotion that's just sitting in you and then come out later in some way that's not constructive. Second, a few principles here in this chapter. This is an overview of the chapter. We can't make and keep commitments to ourselves as well to others. Our commitments become meaningless. And so he says that, like, when you're discussing win-win, right, you would need to know what you want to win. And if you're saying, I'm going to give you your win, right? It's a win for me and a win for you. Then for me to make sure you get that, for me to make sure that you get that, I have to know how to keep that promise to you, whatever that might be, right? Then he talks about the abundance mentality, and he gives a definition: appreciating the uniqueness, inner direction, the proactive nature of others, unlimited possibilities for positive interactive growth and development. So I think that's all good stuff, right? Like that's the attitude we have instead of having like a downward social comparison where people will narcissistically look at others from a position of superiority, right? And they'll tell themselves, I'm better than you. Why? Because of whatever, beauty, youth, fucking, yeah, some people could say white privilege or any in-group, out-group, right? There could be religious groups that think that they're better than the others, right? Or sports teams. Like if you're at a sporting event and it gets violent, right? Because we're saying our team is better than your team, that's not good, right? So anyway, so this is an alternative way to look at our relationship with other people. The problem is in the system, not the people. If you put good people into bad systems, you get bad results. So he's referencing an example here of when you're in an organization, right? And you set up the compensation system incorrectly, right? Where it becomes competitive. Then what happens, or if it's unfair in some ways that people can't perform to their optimum capabilities, then whatever happens, the results will be skewed because of that arrangement of the system. And so taking this, that's where part of the thesis of the philosophy study, or just a group that does these things, is that if we create the system in such a way that it's self-monitoring and reflective and self-correcting, right? And then has a mode to interact with non-group members, right? So there's a way to interact, for example, if you're coming from an atheistic perspective with religious people, right? Where they, if you're just a philosopher, sometimes atheists will argue and then make people upset. And that's not really useful in that moment. It's better to take a position of a psychologist and be empathetic and compassionate to someone's need to have religious views, right? For them, it's necessary. So, okay, I'll respect it as necessary, but what are you going to do with it? And what are we going to allow other people to do with it, right? And that goes for all beliefs. Just as sometimes religion, one of the beliefs is like it's taboo to question what we think or what we do. Just got to let it happen, right? And yeah, okay, I guess so. Like from a cultural perspective, where we just, no, I don't want to use the word tolerance, but from the perspective of respect, or appreciation as culture as an art form, we can appreciate, beliefs as an art form, almost like a dance. I'm dancing with ideas, and it can be beautiful, I guess, for some people, sure. But it's only when the dance starts to hurt people, like some weird cannibalistic ceremony with fucking people back in the past. That's crazy. And if we saw that today, you'd probably be appalled, like painting in the blood of the innocent, like some crazy shit, right? Then the dance just isn't fucking cool anymore. It's like, no, the feathers and the colors were great, but now it's like you're killing people. We can't be doing that, right? And that can go with political ideologies as well. So we have these different social systems. I'm expanding on this, right? And what the meta social system, or like the conditions of social optimization, what is that? You know what I mean? That is a wise thing to do. What are the conditions? Let's just say we don't know for now. Well, we can at least say there are some, like cooperation, for example, not like pro-social behavior. Then let's do that, right? And so that's why this book is so good, because it focuses on the individual, and then it goes to group functioning, right? Whereas other books that are like in the same category, like Tony Robbins' Unlimited Power, like there are maybe some things and how to construct empowering, optimistic, or hopeful beliefs. Like, how do I think about things in a self-supportive way, right? But then instead of self-deprecating, right, or being pessimistic. But the problem with, like, for example, with Tony Robbins is he references there's a lot of NLP, and that's a pseudoscience, neuro-linguistic programming, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you think about NLP?
It's pseudoscience. It's just, you're just asking too much of behaviorism, You're looking at classical conditioning and you're really trying to go the distance with it. And it just, there's kind of limited psychologists do this stuff, right? They make associations. And so you can't just like, I think it's almost like hypnosis. Some people with the trait of suggestibility, that I can say things to you, or you're gullible, you're willing to just believe it, right? They're more likely to have, I would say that they're more likely to have positive results with things like NLP, but it's because of that trait. It's not because of the NLP. It's like a third variable.
So you talk about for example, how to empathy with the religious people. Does it have to be mutual? Like you are atheist. If they don't emphasize you, they don't give you empathy, like they will say, oh, I don't want to understand you. Even you try to understand them. Oh, okay, this is a culture, this is like a dance, all this is good, but what if they don't give you the similar attitude towards your belief, your
Sure.
So in that situation, what would you do?
So we want this is a great question. We want to unpack this, right?
Right.
Part of it is we want to look at, even just using Covey's terminology, the circle of influence and the circle of concern, right? I can influence myself and how I interact with you, but I can't really control you. That's for you to do. And so some things in the communication, you can demonstrate and be a role model to everybody else for how to think critically and how to engage with people at a philosophical level. But they may not have certain skills, or the content itself, or the mode of communicating, how you're being reasonable, like identifying critical thinking errors or talk about someone's behavior. Like similarly, a narcissist finds it difficult to take criticism.
Right.
Someone who's dogmatic in their religion finds it difficult to contemplate non-religious beliefs or arguments that go against their religious beliefs. They just, as soon as they've learned, some of them, like serious extremists, have learned that anytime their mind goes there, that's the devil. And then they will associate you with the devil, right? And so it's important to be aware of that and still use your empathy and your awareness of them and of yourself. And I think part of it is the relationship, right? That fundamentally people have beliefs, but as soon as you put people together, that's like now a whole new level of interaction. It's not interaction with what I'm saying, my self-awareness. It's a social phenomenon now. So I can be aware of you, maybe I'm not aware, right? And so it's not really just going to be one encounter, right? If you think of like the affiliation with a religious community, they may have been at the same church their whole life, or synagogue or mosque. That's where they go, right? And nobody questions things there. So the way you're communicating and the way you're being, like I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I had to go to this class and I read all this stuff, I was like, oh, I just didn't feel, I have to go downtown Toronto right now. Oh. Like I come from Thunder Bay. There's like more, there's more, the amount of trees in Thunder Bay is equivalent to the amount of people in Toronto, right? And I live in a forest, okay? Like the Boreal forest, like there's fucking trees there, right?
Okay. There's nothing but trees?
There's a lot of trees, man. That's what this place is, a lot of trees. If you like trees, you'll be happy there, right? And so I just didn't feel like doing it. And then I was like thinking about like, sometimes I feel that I have this assertiveness, but my anxiety, if I don't recognize my social anxiety, a little bit of it will exist here and there. What? Okay. Well, we can come to that in a second. If I don't recognize my own social anxiety, then I may overcompensate. So sometimes I'll like have a really assertive, dominating voice to just be like, I'm saying something, but the way I'm saying it can actually throw people off, the students, like these 20-year-olds, right? Or the professor who's like, who's this guy? And what I really need to do, because I have a lot of important things to say, is to talk slowly and gently so that they can understand the content, right? Because from their perspective, there's me as the person, and then there's like the auditory information. And the auditory information is really what I want them to understand. And so if I can cushion that content in the way I'm speaking, they're more likely to listen to it And then part of it too is I might have to just stop talking and let them interject or say something. I have to be mindful of their emotions as I'm communicating this stuff. And so I think that like the question is, well, what if they don't reciprocate the same standards or rules of engagement that you are demonstrating? Well, you don't stop doing those things because they just will be learning. Same with people with certain psychiatric disorders. They may be learning, right, they are learning through the interaction, and it's your role and responsibility. That's what it means to be like a justice or like a Jedi, you know, is to devote yourself to being that role model. And I think there's a place within the Philosophy Society for people that want to do that, who want to go in the world and demonstrate through their behavior and through their actions how to deal with ideas, right? It'll take a long time. And really the person has to feel safe and comfortable with you. It almost becomes like a therapeutic relationship, right? Because it's like they've developed this belief that's unfounded because of fear of social isolation or ostracization, or because it satisfies some anxiety about death or someone they've lost. It's helping them with grief. And so if you're going to take that away through reason, then you have to be prepared to fill in the other gaps. And that's why fundamentally the Philosophy Society, if it was, you were going to argue competing with religion as an institution, it needs to provide that same social safety net that religion does, right? The main difference is that it's not a charity organization. So we can talk about those things. We can say that it could be, or you can do all these different things. That's fine. Okay, next slide. Okay, so principles of interpersonal leadership. And so this is the first section. So I'll read through this slide first, and then we'll go to the book. So the first example he gives is the president of, so let's say corporation, president of a corporation, that they want to cooperate. So the president says they're selfish, they're unwilling to cooperate, there's a resistance to authority, there's defensive communication. And so Covey identifies, he's using this analogy again of the emotional bank account is low. And the corporate culture doesn't have any trust for each other. And so he's like, well, how did this happen? And he looks behind the dude, and there's all these horse races on this poster on a racetrack, and all the managers have their heads like copy and pasted, like with scissors or something, because this was written in the 80s. So they didn't really have colored printers back then. And then at the end of the race was this picture of Bermuda, like a vacation, right? And so the problem was he wanted his people to work together, but the context of the social situation was competition, not cooperation. And so the problem of the flawed paradigm of competition in itself, the way that the manager or the president was making the managers perceive the context was competitive. So they focused instead on producing personal and organizational excellence by thinking win-win. So he wanted to make a transition in this organization. Okay, so let's look at the text here. So we're on page 236. And yeah, so at the very beginning has this quote, "We have committed the golden rule to memory. Now let's commit it to life." So he was asked to work with a company whose president was concerned about the lack of cooperation. The basic problem, they're all selfish. They don't cooperate. They have more capacity to produce. So he's like, can you help us develop a human relations program? And then Covey's like, well, is the problem the people or their paradigm?
What's the paradigm?
The paradigm is like how they see things in like a workplace culture, right? And so he's like, or the manager's like, go look for yourself. And so Covey's like, well, I found real selfishness, an unwillingness to cooperate, resistance to authority, defensive communication. And then he puts it in terms of an overdrawn emotional bank account. And so what that did is there's this culture of low trust. And he's like, well, I want to look a little bit deeper at why these people don't cooperate. What's the reward for not cooperating? He's like, there is no reward for not cooperating. Rewards are much greater if they do cooperate. And he's like, are they? And then behind him, he saw the chart with all the racehorses on the track. And then superimposed was the picture of the manager's heads. And then there's this beautiful poster of Bermuda. So once a week, the manager would bring all the people into the office, next page, and talk about cooperation. Let's all work together. We'll make more money if we do. And then he would pull the curtain down and show them the chart. Now, who's going to win? And so Covey gives this analogy. It's like telling one flower to grow and watering another. Saying, if we fire people, we'll keep on firing people until morale improves. So inducing fear to make people be calm doesn't make any sense. He wanted cooperation. He wanted his people to work together, to share ideas, and to benefit from the effort. But he was setting them up in a competitive mode with each other. One manager's success meant the failure of others. Excuse me. So many problems in business with people was the result of a flawed paradigm. The president was trying to get the fruits of cooperation from a paradigm of competition. When it didn't work, he wanted a technique, a quick fix to make the people cooperate. And then Covey uses this phrase, you can't change the fruit without changing the root. So it's kind of like, look at the cause of the problem, right? And determining what that is. Working on the attitudes and behaviors would have been like hacking at the leaves. So we focused instead on producing personal and organizational excellence in an entirely different way by developing information and reward systems that reinforce the value of cooperation. So that's good. Okay. So the moment you step from independence to interdependence in any capacity, you step into a leadership role. You're in a position of influencing other people. The habit of interpersonal leadership is to think win-win. So next slide. 6 paradigms of human interaction. So win-win is a philosophy of human interaction. So he gives these different examples of human interaction. There's win-win, lose-lose, win-lose, win, lose-win, and then win-win or no deal. So 237, win-win is not a technique. It's a total philosophy of human interaction. It's one of 6 paradigms of interaction, and he lists them. So let's go to the first one here. Win-win. Seeks mutual benefit of all human interactions. Agreements or solutions are mutually beneficial, mutually satisfying. All parties feel good about the decision and feel committed to the action plan. Life is a cooperative, not competitive arena. The third alternative, it's not your way or my way, it's a better way. So on 237 at the bottom, win-win is a frame of mind and heart that constantly seeks mutual benefit in all human interactions. Win-win means that 238 at the top, agreements or solutions are mutually beneficial, mutually satisfying. A win-win solution. All parties feel good about the decision and committed to the action plan. Sees life as a cooperative, not competitive arena. Most people tend to think in terms of dichotomies, strong or weak, hard or soft, win or lose. This kind of thinking is fundamentally flawed. So you would say like the fallacy of the false dichotomy. Based on power and position rather on principle. Win-win is based on the paradigm that there is plenty for everybody. One person's success is not achieved at the expense or the exclusion of the success of others. Win-win is a belief in the third alternative, blah, blah, blah. We already said that. Okay, so next slide. Win or lose. This is slide 1 of 2. So it's an authoritarian approach using position, power, credentials, possessions, or personality. So it's, again, like, I don't think it's only those things. Sometimes the situation can be set up. It's not necessarily authoritarian, but it can be. So that the person's winning is just structures the game in a way that they win, right? So the first example is conditional love. The person is not intrinsically valuable. Value does not lie inside them, it lies outside. So he gives this example of like siblings, and then the parents give love to one sibling and not another. He talks about cruel peers. You're accepted or rejected totally on the basis of conformity to their expectations and norms. Next slide. Example 3 in the academic world. There's a normal distribution curve, so like this. And in this case, I don't 100% agree. He's saying that everything is in relation to others for grades, but it's not often that teachers really do that anymore. You don't get graded based on the performance of others. So maybe he's communicating from whenever he was, looking at academic stuff, but very few people are like that. Individuals value by comparing him or her to everyone else, graded in relation to other people, not against their potential for full use of present capacity. Competition, not cooperation, lies at the core of the educational process. Like what I've noticed is that some professors will just make questions very difficult, where a certain percentage of people will always fail. And that way they get this normal distribution where most people aren't getting like A+, right? And the last example for win-lose is in the law. The defense mind is neither creative nor cooperative, a defensive mind. In this context, the win-lose for law, it's very based on survival and doesn't create synergy. It's based on an adversarial concept. Okay, so 238. One alternative to win-win is win-lose, the paradigm of the race to Bermuda. If I win, you lose. As a leadership style, win-lose is an authoritarian approach. I get my way, you don't get yours. Win-lose people are prone to use position, power, credentials, possessions, and personality to get their way. People can be deeply scripted in the win-lose mentality since they're very young. Powerful forces at work in the family. For example, one child is compared with another. When patience, understanding, or love is given or withdrawn on the basis of such comparisons, people are into win-lose thinking. Love is given on a conditional basis. Someone has to earn love. What's being communicated to them is that they are not intrinsically valuable or lovable. Value does not lie inside them, it lies outside, in comparison with somebody else or against some expectation. What happens to a young mind and heart, highly vulnerable, highly dependent upon the support and emotional affirmation of their parents, in the face of conditional love? The child is molded, shaped, and programmed in the win-lose mentality. If I'm better than my sibling, my parents will love me more. My parents don't love me as much as my sibling. I'm not as valuable. Another powerful scripting agency is the peer group. Kids want their acceptance from their parents and then their peers. Siblings or friends. We all know how cruel peers can be. They accept or reject on the basis of conformity to their expectations and norms, 239, providing additional scripting towards win-lose. In the academic world, he talks about the normal distribution curve, basically says that you get an A because someone else got a C. That's, again, not 100, like, I don't think this is 100% accurate. I think that professionally and ethically, an instructor or professor has the duty to give you a grade based on your performance, independent of others, right?
Maybe it's in his era.
I'm not sure. Yeah, because maybe, right? But yeah, interprets an individual's value by comparing him to her to everyone else. No recognition is given to intrinsic value. Everyone is extrinsically defined. Like, we are defined by our grades in some degree, but I would like to say that we have the capacity to control the outcome of the grade based on the input, right? If you study more, the correlation is that usually you get better grades.
And also on this grading system, I mean, these days I heard there's a new kind of a trend, like they reevaluate this grading system. Like, why? I mean, who said what kind of theory, what kind of that is being reflected, and why they focus on so much on these elements but not the others? Like these days in the organization or even the school, university, it seems that there's a reevaluation, about the system. Like maybe there's a lot of postmodern theories that comes into this place. I'm just talking about like is it focused too much on rationality? That kind of things.
Well, I think that one thing is the grades usually are the best representation of competency.
Right.
But the one thing is that the grades could be legitimate, like through some form of plagiarism or academic misconduct. The other side is that over time, there's this thing called grade inflation, where people are getting higher grades, but their competency isn't equivalently increasing. And that's been happening, generally for a while.
Yeah, I heard some criticism is like this grading system is kind of they said it about maybe it's a postmodern. They said this is a product of a capitalist system that they prepare the student to go into the capitalist system. So the grading is focusing on how they could what will a company will look at you. Preparing them for the work, for the market, so that there's some directions for this grading, so that it's the below is the whole capitalist system. I heard this kind of criticism.
Well, it's merit based.
Yeah, merit based. Yeah,
I can agree with that.
Meritocracy.
Yeah, I don't know about capitalist. Like it's embedded within a capitalist system because it's paid for tuition and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue. So the comparative information doesn't tell you if somebody, like, what's going on with a person when they get the grades. Like maybe the grades aren't representative of their competency or what they've learned. Grades are carriers of social value, open doors of opportunity if they close them. Competition, not cooperation, lies at the core of educational process. Cooperation is usually associated with cheating. Another powerful programming agent is athletics. People who are in sports when they're in school develop a paradigm that life is a big game, a zero-sum game. Some win and some lose. Winning is beating the other person. Another agent is law. We live in a litigious society. First thing people think about when they get into trouble is suing someone, taking them to court. Their defensive minds are neither creative nor cooperative. We need law or else society will deteriorate. Provide survival doesn't create synergy. At best, it results in compromise. Law is based on an adversarial concept. The recent trend of encouraging lawyers and law schools to focus on peaceable negotiation techniques, win-win, use of private courts, not provided the ultimate solution, but it does reflect a growing awareness of the problem. There's a place for win-lose thinking in truly competitive, low-trust situations. Most of life is not a competition. You don't have to live each day competing with people that matter to us, people that are closest to us. For example, if someone says, who is winning in your marriage? The answer should be both of us. It's not one versus the other. And he says, this is a ridiculous question. If both people aren't winning, they're losing. Most of life is interdependent, not independent, not an independent reality. Most results you want depend on the cooperation between you and others. The win-lose mentality is dysfunctional to that cooperation.
Question on this win-lose, I agree. Like what the example he raised, like marriage or the kids. But if you say most of life, is independent. Let me give you, for example, in the corporate world,
Mhm.
For example, Apple and Samsung, they ultimately, they're competing with each other.
Yeah.
And actually they all listed in the stock market, right? So they have to be responsible for their stock price, because they're responsible for the investors, for the board, whatever. So how in that they have to compete very heavily.
Mhm.
Like you look at the cars, with Tesla, goes 10% off. It will knock out a lot of cars, right? The consumer will go there.
Mhm.
Tesla will not care about how many workers will lose their job from Toyota, for example.
Mhm.
So in that, this is the world, because the price, the stock market, everything. And I also talk about country, Ukraine has to, I'm just saying, on marriage, because on the system, the fundamental structure of marriage is we are equal. Me and my partner are equal, right?
Mhm.
We're here. We're not coming here to compete.
Mhm.
So the nature is very different from the corporate competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, in this chapter, he says that we want to have competition in the free market because it will create better goods and services, for example.
Mhm.
But in the exchange of ideas or in problem solving, it's better to have cooperation, not trying little sneaky techniques to make people lose, right? The results, we want the best results. And there are different ways to get that for different contexts. And don't always go to a competitive approach. In some situations, being cooperative is better.
So maybe if I would like to ask, because of a different situation, maybe we should differentiate what situation is better for win-lose. What is like I just give the car example. Their mindset, if they say, oh, I have to care about Samsung, my competitors.
Yeah.
They I don't think they have that kind of mindset.
Yeah, in the market, it's better.
Yeah.
Right. Or if you're at war,
right,
and you don't want to lose your human rights or something like that, or your culture,
yeah,
then that makes sense.
Because it's very competitive. If Samsung won, that means Apple gonna lay off people. Sometimes.
Sure.
Or even the giants like that. Look at the if Costco opened, so many mom and pop store had to close.
Mhm.
Loblaws, so it's like that.
I think in nature there's a natural sense of like losing, right?
Mhm.
Like for example, like carnivores eat other animals, right? Not plants. And so, but as human beings, we can think about things and we can train ourselves to have healthy habits. And so if a certain context, like always, like some things require competition because of the nature of the thing, like the market, for example, or like if you're defending yourself in war, or a sports game, right? That's just the structure of the context. But other contexts like problem solving or resolving disagreements doesn't have to be that way. Both people can win, which is better, right? Because I think the difference is that one side doesn't have standards or objectives that cancel out the other side. Like in a war situation, like Russia attacking Ukraine, it's the case that Russia is being deceptive, not accurate in what they're saying, right? And taking away the rights, land, and lives of people in a different place.
Yeah. Because this is very interesting. This is I want to, because it says life. The majority of life, most of life is independent. Another example, like the presidential debate.
Sure.
Like
I watched the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's is that a for that kind of things, like politicals, politics, like right now, Justin Trudeau and the conservatives and the NDP, they are on the political world. Is it a win-win, or is it a win-lose? What about that?
Well, that's what they talk about when they want to have a like in the Americans say bipartisan. They want to like work together, and similarly to Canada, like the NDP and the Liberals have been working together. It's just that it comes down to sometimes there's certain properties of their platform that directly contradict another property. And so that's where this chapter is useful. So we'll get to how to negotiate at the end of the chapter.
Yeah, for sure. I want to, because you mentioned about debate, I would like to ask you about the debate. For example, using debate because I saw the debate, the way they attack each other. I didn't see any win-win. I think you are dumb, you are disgrace.
Well, Trump, I think that Kamala Harris she fucking did a really good job at debating Trump there, right? He was not ready for that. He just is not, like Joe Biden, like, come on.
Yeah,
as much as you make fun of him, it's like beating up elderly people is not an accomplishment. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like pick on someone your own size.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let's just go with this for a little bit, and we'll get to negotiation after.
Yeah.
So lose-win. So that's where you accept the loss for other person to win. And so some context that might be okay. And that's what compromise really is. So people like this are passive. They'll do anything to keep the peace, quick to please or appease. There's no standards, there's no demands, no expectations. They have no vision. They seek strength from popularity or acceptance with little courage to express their own feelings. Constantly being repressed, not transcending their feelings towards a higher meaning. Find that it affects the quality of their self-esteem and eventually the quality of their relationships with others. Okay, so let's go to the text here. 240. Lose-win. Some people are programmed the other way, to lose first. Lose-win is worse than win-lose because it has no standards, no demands, no expectations, no vision. Quick to please or appease. Seek strength from popularity or acceptance. Little courage to express their own feelings and convictions and are easily intimidated by the ego strengths of others. In negotiation, lose-win is seen as a capitulation, giving in or giving up. As a leadership style, permissiveness or indulgence means being the nice guy even if nice guys finish last. Win-lose people love lose-win people because they can feed on them. They love their weaknesses, they take advantage of them. Those weaknesses complement their strengths. The problem is that lose-win people bury a lot of feelings. Unexpressed feelings never die. They're buried alive and come out later in uglier ways, like psychosomatic illness, like respiratory nervous or circuits. So we need to have some evidence for that, but whatever. We understand what you're trying to say. Like stress stays in the body. Okay.
What was a psychosomatic illness?
It's when they have a physiological symptom for a non-physical cause, like stress. Or like a kid will wet themselves if there's like an abusive babysitter, so the parents, to get them out of a dangerous situation, right? There's nothing actually wrong with the kid. It's just that they're nervous. And then the mind tries to protect the person that way. Okay. The reincarnation of cumulative resentment, deep disappointment, disillusion, repressed by the lose-win mentality, disproportionate rage or anger, overreaction to minor provocation, cynicism, and other embodiments of the suppressed emotion. People who are constantly repressing, not transcending feelings towards a higher meaning, affects the quality of their self-esteem and eventually the quality of their relationships with others. Both win-lose and lose-win are weak positions based in personal insecurities. In the short run, win-lose will produce more results. Draws on the often considerable strengths and talents of other people at the top. 241. Lose-win is a weak and chaotic form from the outset. Executives, managers, and parents swing back and forth on a pendulum from win-lose inconsideration to lose-win indulgence. They can't stand confusion and lack structure, direction, expectation, and discipline any longer. They swing back to win-lose until the guilt undermines their resolve and drives them back to lose-win, until anger, frustration, and drive them back to win-lose again. So he's observing this relationship, right? Next slide. Lose-lose. Determined, stubborn, ego-invested individuals. So examples of divorce. So the husband was court ordered to give half of the assets of all the property they owned. And so he had like $100,000 car. He sold it for like $100 and then gave her 50
So it's like,
instead of
if you
50.
don't want me to live well, I don't want you to live well either.
It's self-destructive. If I'm
Self-destructive.
going down, I'm taking you with me. Okay, so 241. Two win-lose people get together. That is, when two determined, stubborn, ego-invested individuals interact, the result will be lose-lose. Both will lose. Both will become vindictive and want to get back or get even. Blind to the fact that murder is suicide, that revenge is a two-edged sword. So, for example, the divorce, the husband was directed by the judge to sell assets and turn over half the proceedings to his ex-wife. He sold the car worth over $10,000 for $50 and gave $25 to his wife. The husband was proceeding in the same manner systematically through all the assets. Some people become so centered on the enemy or perceived enemy, they become blind to everything except their desire for that person to lose, even if it means losing themselves. Lose-lose is also the philosophy of the highly dependent person without inner direction who is miserable and thinks everyone else should be too. Okay, next one is win. So win is when we don't necessarily want someone else to lose, but what matters most is that we get what we want. We secure our own ends and leave everybody else to secure theirs. So back to the text, 241. Another common alternative is to think win. Win mentally doesn't necessarily want someone else to lose. That's irrelevant. What matters is they get what they want. I'm repeating here, so fine. No sense of contest or composition. Win is probably the most common approach in everyday negotiation. A person with the win mentality thinks in terms of securing their own ends and not thinking about the people. So, okay, what's the best option? So there's two slides here. We don't create win-lose situations that need future cooperation. If the relationship has more value than the issue, lose-win may be the best option. The best choice is relative to the reality of the situation. Read reality accurately. Be aware of imposing win-lose or old scripting into situations. So that's where he says it's kind of context dependent, right? We just don't want to always go in with a specific view and we use it all the time. Like someone who's like very sportsy and they just always, and they're competitive in areas where it doesn't have to be competitive, right? Next slide. Win is interdependently the best. Win-lose affects long-term status of relationship. Lose-lose is never good. If both parties don't win, they both lose. So the example of this president of the retail store mistook lose-win for win-win. The long-term impact of lose-win was a loss for both. Because if I'm losing, I'll build up resentment in myself, and then it's not good for long-term relationships. Win-win is a focus on communication, listening, and expressing our point of view. So being empathetic and communicating. Okay, so 242. Of the 5 philosophies, or the 5 interactions, I don't know if it's a philosophy, which is the most effective? Well, it depends. 2 paragraphs down. The circumstance in which you would want to win wouldn't be highly concerned with the relationship. The best choice, then, depends on reality. The challenge is to read reality accurately and not to translate win-lose or other scripting into every situation. Most situations are part of an interdependent reality. Win-win is really the only viable alternative of the 5. Win-lose is not viable because I appear to win in a confrontation with you. Feelings, attitudes towards me, and our relationship have been affected. I may get what I want now. You will come to me again. The short-term win will really be a long-term loss. So an interdependent win-lose is really a lose-lose in the long run. Lose-win, you may appear to get what you want for the moment, 243. How will that affect my attitude about working with you, about fulfilling the contract? Not to feel as anxious to please you. My attitude about you or your company may spread as I associate with others in the industry. Lose-lose obviously isn't viable in any context. If I focus on my own win and don't even consider your point of view, there's no basis for any kind of productive relationship. In the long run, if it isn't a win for both of us, we both lose. That's why win-win is the only real alternative in interdependent realities. So again, interdependent means that you're working together. So it assumes cooperation, right? So he gives this example, working with a client, the president of a large chain of retail stores. The client says, win-win sounds great, but it's idealistic. The tough, realistic business world isn't like that. Win-lose is everywhere. If you're not out there playing the game, you just can't make it. So he's like, okay. Covey says, try going for win-lose with your customers. Is that realistic? He's like, no. He's like, why not? I lose my customers. Well, then go for lose-win. Just give the store away. Is that realistic? He's like, no margin, no mission. If you're not making money, there's no business. As we considered the various alternatives, win-win appeared to be the only truly realistic approach. It's true with customers, but not with suppliers. He's like, but you're the customer of the supplier. He's like, we recently renegotiated our lease agreement with the mall operator or owner. We took a win-win attitude. We were open, reasonable, conciliatory. They saw that position as being soft and weak, and they took advantage of us. But why did you go for lose-win? We didn't. We went for win-win. But I thought you said you lost. 244. He realized that what he had called win-win was really lose-win. He was shocked. We examined the long-term impact of that lose-win, suppressed feelings, trampled values, resentment that seethed under the surface of the relationship. We agreed that it really wasn't a loss for both parties in the end. If this man had a real win-win attitude, he would have stayed longer in the communication process, listened to the mall owner more, then expressed his point of view with more courage. So that's the point. That is like a principle there. And when someone isn't reciprocating standards of mutual gain or mutual benefit, like let's just both be honest, not be disrespectful, let's listen to each other, you can at least embody that to understand them more, and you acting that way will more likely elicit that same behavior to you. If this man had a real, okay, so we said that. He continued in the win-win spirit until a solution was reached they both felt good about. That solution, the third alternative, synergistically, probably something never of them even thought of on their own.
Gotcha. I like the whole mentality. Definitely this is remind me that this is a good angle to think about things. But I just had a question, because he talked about this with the customer things. This sometimes in the real business world, because I'm in the business too,
Mm-hmm.
it may not be a little bit oversimplified. For example, he's not the only one in the market, in the industry. Several of his competitors, normally this is competing for the customers. This is not like a one-to-one situation.
Yeah.
If you don't, on a supplier also, he's a so like a Samsung, Apple situation, for example.
Sure.
If they're competing or the mobile automobile, you're competing for the customers. You want to give low price, whatever to get the customer from your competitors. You're actually killing them. You're actually
well, but they're not doing like, I think this is the thing. Like, like maybe people are interacting with the market, but that means if I make a good product at a low price and the customer is happy with it, it's a win-win. Interacting with the market is interacting with the customer, really. But there are multiple people interacting in parallel with that market or customer.
Yeah.
That they're not actually interacting with each other unless they do business with each other. So it's not really, I would argue that's not really a relationship between me and the competitor.
I know it's not a relation, but because I just want to think about in the practical world, because sometimes if I try to apply this to the customers, I have to also take into there's other players in the market.
Yeah.
I have to look at what my competitors are doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm just saying a lot of those factors are actually affecting when I consider whether I can apply this win-win or not.
So let's look at it this way, right?
Yeah.
When you interact with the market as a business, that is a public activity. The market is everybody, right? And we all agree to learn from each other. Now there are degrees, like there's open source information, and some organizations do that. Like Elon Musk releases a bunch of information to people so that they can learn from it and produce better products, right? Not everyone has to go to that extent, but it's important to accept that even if you put a law there, people still might take your shit, open up your phone and learn how you did it, right? And the reason is because their motivation is for the market. So even if someone tries to create a win-lose situation where they don't have open source information or they don't provide details to other competitors publicly, they can still take it, right? Like Elon Musk says, that's what these language models did for AI. They just took everyone's shit, right? Without asking for it. They just did it anyways, and no one can find out, right? And so if you're engaging with the market that is a public thing, the way you're engaging is open to the public. like in possibility. Maybe legally it's not for certain things, but I wouldn't really rely on that. If your business is founded upon nobody knowing, like that's like you're really putting a lot on that possibility that people won't look at your shit and do a better job, right? That's an ignorance to how business and the market works. It's better to create a model that's win-win, that's open and transparent, because that way you can't lose, right?
I didn't. What's your major point?
So you're talking about how the relationship between the competitors is not win-win. How can it be, right? What I'm saying is the relationship is not based on them interacting in that way. It's not a direct interaction. Each competitor is interacting with the market, and that interaction, they can learn from each other. And them learning from each other is better for the market. If they're interacting with each other, it's because they're doing business with each other. And that becomes, it's a market again, right?
Yeah, I was trying to, because you mentioned about market, I agree, that's a very reasonable. Because Adam Smith, in his famous, his theory about free market, he used an example, like when I make them, if I'm a commercial making bread, I don't, all I need to do, I don't have like this, doing a charity, whatever mindset. Actually, I'm very selfish. Well, I just want to give the best bread, best price to the customers. I try to kick out of the competitor. Actually, that's what I do. This free market doesn't require me to have a good intention. I can be completely selfish, but because it's a free market, everyone is doing these selfish things, but in the end, it contributes to selflessness.
We can use it in the categorical imperative in the sense that like humanity in general, like there's your specific transaction, but then there's like the sum of all transactions. And that's kind of like, you need to understand that is what's going on. Like when people say the economy, this just doesn't mean how much money's in my pocket, right? That's like your personal economy. Like how much money do you have? How many resources do you have? What are you doing with resources? But it is part of a larger categorical entity, right? That's the market, All right, win-win or no deal. Slide 1 of 2. So no deal, both parties cannot find a beneficial solution to agree, so they agree to disagree. There's no expectations or contracts if goals and values are completely different. So again, aliens come down, they say, we want to take all your water. We don't have any. You got lots. You've had it for a while. Now it's our turn, right?
Aliens
do that.
What kind of alien?
I don't know. Doesn't really matter.
Alien from Mars?
We're going to use this water on one of the other moons of Jupiter, and we're going to see. We're going to create a new colony for ourselves, right? Close to home for us, right? So you can just say no deal. We don't want that deal.
Colonize the moon?
Maybe they want to do that too. I don't know. But just in the sense that sometimes your goals and values are just not in line. So you don't have to do a business deal with them, right? No deal is an option to keep in mind, which liberates one to understand the deeper issues. So that's to understand that's where the next habit, seek to understand, then be understood, is valuable, right? It's better than a decision either party would regret. So again, taking the lose-win or the win-lose has long-term implications. So he talks about this president of a software company. He's like, they're like programmers. They programmed this software for this bank. And the shit happened at the bank. And the new manager of the bank was like, hey man, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to back out of the contract. The president of the programmer, he was like, he maintained the relationship with the bank by letting the bank back out of the contract. Because he knew it, and legally he was in the right, but he's like, if I force these guys to give me money, we're not going to get any future business, and it's going to give us a bad reputation. And it was a lot of money for him. It was like $80,000.
Oh, yeah.
But then 3 months later, that same president of the bank came back. He's like, I'm ready to do a deal. And it was like 4 times the amount, right? Because he trusted the guy, Okay, next slide. So he talks about this family that loves singing. Eventually, the family used to sing these songs. When the kids got older, they didn't like the songs anymore. And so when determining what to sing, the parents it was important to incorporate, for the kids to be motivated, how they felt in the decision, right? And they work to set up win-win agreements without emotional consequences of expressing one's feelings or ideas. So if someone disagrees, the fact of communicating is more important than agreeing or disagreeing, and accepting disagreements if they occur, and then trying to figure out a way that everyone can agree. That would be the win-win.
Can I ask a question about the 240K case?
Yep.
Because again, he's talking about doing business. In the real world, I'm trying to think about maybe in his era, maybe he can do that. But these days it's more and more difficult to have this mentality. I'll give you an example. A lot of jobs, in North America are lost to those in the third world countries.
Okay.
With the lower, wages and
Sure.
whatever. So that's why a lot of the people actually, in the U.S., they support, Trump, because Trump's promise, make American, whatever.
Yeah.
So because these days the competition is not just from within the U.S. or Canada. The capital they pour into third world countries. They hire people from Vietnam, Indonesia, whatever, outsourcing. Because it's a global economy. So even look at that. It's like if you don't accept this is the difficulty. The local workers, if you don't accept lower wages, I will go to the third world countries. The job will never come back. As you see, a lot of the second tier or the middle town, what do you call it? There's I don't remember. There's a region. There's several states in U.S. They lost their glorious time because the job all goes to other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So the guy J.D. Vance. He actually produced a novel, and also eventually basically talking about those families.
Yeah.
So my question is that in that situation, because we are in this global company things, you have the competitors actually very aggressive. They take all your jobs. Yeah, if there's a room, there's a pie for everyone. I can have this mentality because I still have the hope the business will come back one day to me. But for those, so that's
so it's basically just an attitude towards it's job security, and I think that we need to be realistic about the longevity of certain jobs. Like once robotics and AI, once that I almost want to use the term singularity occurs, once AI makes its own robots and they're just going around doing shit, or we buy our own from Elon for $20,000 a piece, whatever. A lot of jobs are going to change, and that is supposed to free us up time to do other stuff, right? And so I think that part of it is know your industry, and if you're ignorant to your industry and it's changing, that's kind of your fault. You need to be responsible for that for yourself, and having transferable skills. I talked about a tiered system for job security. One is just getting income now, doing something that doesn't violate your values that much, being a criminal that could violate your values. For example, you're I don't want to steal shit or murder people as an assassin, so I'm not going to do that to make money, right? But maybe you could I talked about being a bartender at certain bars goes against my values. I just don't like that specific bar. But I would like to be a gardener. I think being a gardener would be nice. It'd be very relaxing, just whatever. You know what I mean? So you could do that for money right now. And then there's your ideal job that you can get through applications and stuff. Right? It's not immediate. It's better. You could do it long term. And then there's the final stage, which is your entrepreneurial contribution to society, something that you're doing that's independent, that you're not getting hired by somebody else. And it's going to take time for the second two to be fully developed, and you're gaining income from them. And as you're doing the first one, the immediate job, that's where you're preparing for tier 2 and tier 3. And so I think we need to have an attitude towards getting income and money and resources that's realistic. One, a trajectory that promotes your self-independence. That's the end goal of the entrepreneurship stuff, which just means you have to be some kind of an expert. And it's not that there's no jobs. People are getting old, retiring, and dying all the time, right? That's the cycle of life. And even if that wasn't the cycle, you would just be at your own level of expertise, right? Like it's someone who's entering a certain career path shouldn't be as good as you because you have more experience. And if you've educated yourself, you have more knowledge about the field. And so, yeah,
Is there a lot of gardening job outside?
I don't know, but like, I'm just saying, like, or you could do a landscaping company, like find something, there's the immediate income. That's something that needs to be taken care of. And there's different ways to do that, right? And then there's like if you had the best option, if you're going to apply for stuff, what is better than the immediate thing? And that's like a progress. But then there's the independence thing, like your dream job, but it has to make sense, right? It can't just be like, I'm going to get people to buy rocks that I find on the ground. Like really, you have to do something with those rocks for them to have value, right?
Oh, yeah. I think that this is perfect because I think both several Marx even use the term. He's a famous term called alien. Like basically talking about if you're doing
alienation.
Yeah, alienation. If you're doing a job that you don't know the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
you are just basically using yourself as a mean, as a tool for something you don't quite understand. So like you work, you don't know the meaning of your job.
Mhm.
That's actually alienation.
Sure.
So go to liberate yourself. That each person is talking about should be freely choose to do whatever he is passionate about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last point on here is no deal is not applicable to all situations. So in some contexts, you're not going to abandon your family or your kids just because you just don't want to, whatever, you know what I mean? You don't want to be around them anymore. You want to put the effort in. Okay, so let's look at the book here. So we're on 244. So win-win or no deal. If these individuals had not come up with a synergistic solution that's agreeable to both, they could have gone for an even higher expression of win-win. No deal basically means that if we can't find a solution that would benefit us both, we agree to disagree. No deal. No expectations have been created. No performance contracts established. Obvious that our values and goals are going in the opposite directions. Better to realize this up front instead of downstream when expectations have been created and both parties will be disillusioned. When you have no deal as an option in your mind, there's no need to manipulate people to push your own agenda, drive for what you want. You can be open, really try to understand the deeper issues underlying the positions. With no deal as an option, I only want to go for win-win. I want to win. I want you to win. I wouldn't want to get my way and have you not feel good about it. I don't think it would be, you would feel good if you got your way and I gave in. So let's work for a win-win. If we can't find it, then let's agree that we won't make a deal at all. Better not to deal than to live with a decision that wasn't right for both of us. So 245. Sometime after learning the concept of win-win or no deal, the president of this small computer software company came to him. So he's developed this new software. He sold a 5-year contract to a bank. The bank ended up changing presidents. The president came to him, the new president said, I'm uncomfortable with these software conversions. However, the programmer, his company was in deep financial trouble. He had every legal right to enforce the contract with the bank, but because he was convinced of the value of the principle of win-win, he told them, we have a contract. Your bank has secured our products and our services to convert you to this program. We understand you're not happy about it. We'd like to give you back the contract, give you back your deposit. And if you're ever looking for help in the future, come back and see us. The programmer walked away from an $84,000 contract. It was basically financial suicide. But he felt in the long run, if the principle were true, win-win, they would come back and it would be a healthy relationship. 3 months later, the new president called him. I'm going to make changes to his data processing, and they signed a contract for $240,000.
This is I want to just maybe have a discussion about this is really a dilemma because in this case, for him to be able to there's a several assumption here. First of all, his financial resources is still quite good. That he can wait, he can afford to lose. When he basically give up this he give back this project, right? Mm-hmm. And then so in the reality, sometimes even a company whatever has a lot of employees to feed, he needs this $84,000.
Yeah,
I think that this is simplified, like in the real world, like I don't know, maybe I'm a third world country, maybe it's different in Canada. It's I sometimes I want to do win-win. But for me to win-win, I have to be survived first.
Okay.
You know, if I'm giving out that $84,000, that means, you know, I will go bankrupt, you know, the next day, you know, because that's what happened in, you know, many third world countries, you know. In this situation, can we still do women? Exactly what even in Canada, you talk about, yeah, I can do some intermediate jobs, you know. Is that many intermediate jobs that people can still? Because what I heard is that, you don't work well, you go to food bank, you know. That's what happened, like even in Canada, you know. So I'm not. I only been here 3 years, so I don't know, is that situation that extreme? Because from this example is you have to be able to survive first, right? And then you can think about win-win, you know.
Sure.
You know. So what do you
Yeah, well, like I think it's a case-by-case situation, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah.
So in this context, he was able to let the 84,000 go, the programmer, the manager of that company, you know?
Because the cash flow is pretty good.
Well, he said it was basically financial suicide in the chapter. So like,
Okay.
but I think like it's just to say that like they had enough resources to not go bankrupt, and they didn't want to create a relationship of win-lose for whatever reason. And he hoped that allowing the bank to back out of the contract would be healthy for them in the future. And it ended up being correct that it did work out. So this is, and again, Stephen Covey is writing this.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a survey of all the business deals of 2015 and you're like,
Well,
okay.
that they didn't come back. There's also a case like that, right?
Yeah, and that can happen. I think it's just that like as a normative principle, we're going to do this because over time, throughout all of our interactions, we're more likely to be successful in the long run, not just looking at isolated instances, right? That's kind of what he's saying.
It kind of remind me of like some saint in history,
Okay.
like someone that very generous, like I'm willing to give out. Like, they have that kind of feeling, like giving out,
Charity.
charity.
Well, I don't think this is a charity situation. This is a business thing. He's just trying to like have healthy relationships, because if the bank felt that they were being scammed or whatever, then the reputation will be affected too. So they might even get the 84,000, but maybe if they get no clients after that, then they're still fucked, right? Okay, let's continue. So 245 at the bottom. Anything less than win-win is an interdependent reality. In an interdependent reality is a poor second best that will have impact on the long-term relationship. The cost of that impact needs to be carefully considered. If you can't reach a true win-win, you're very often better to go for no deal. Win-win or no deal provides tremendous emotional freedom in the family relationship. So again, it's like, don't feel that you have to get to a specific outcome. You can just disengage, right? 246. Friend whose family has been involved in singing together for years. As the children grew older, their taste in music began to change, and they wanted to have more say in what they performed and what they wore. They became less responsive to direction. The mother recognized the kids need to express themselves and be part of the decision-making process. She set up a win-win or no deal. She told them she wanted to arrive at an agreement that everyone felt good about, or they would simply find other ways to enjoy their talents. As a result, everyone felt free to express their feelings and ideas, and they worked to set up a win-win agreement, knowing that whether or not they could agree, there would be no emotional strings. So even if they decided not to sing anymore, it was still okay, right? Not having conditional love. Think win-win or no deal, the win-win or no deal approach is the most realistic at the beginning of a business relationship or enterprise. In a continuing business relationship, no deal may not be a viable option. It could create serious problems. So you're raising this issue, right? Efforts to preserve the relationship. People sometimes go on for years making one compromise after another. 246. This creates serious problems for the people and for the businesses, especially if the competition operates on win-win and synergy. Without no deal, many businesses simply deteriorate and either fail or have to be turned over to professional managers. Experience shows, again, in Covey's case, it's better in setting up a family business or a business between friends to acknowledge the possibility of no deal downstream and to establish some kind of buy-sell agreement so that the business can prosper without permanently damaging a relationship. Some relationships where no deal is not viable. I wouldn't abandon my kids or my spouse. Okay, so next slide. 5 dimensions of win-win. So win-win is the habit of interpersonal leadership. Through the endowments of self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and willpower, you can create win-win relationships. The relationship with others is based on mutual learning, influence, and benefits. So again, it's a paradigm towards our relationship with other people. It's not saying I'm better than others or I deserve this special attention. Requires vision, proactive initiative, and principle-centered security, guidance, wisdom, and power. So he's got everything here on the slide. And he gives this diagram of character, relationships, and agreements within the environment of win-win structure and systems. So I'm going to show the diagram. I'm going to read the first little bit first. So page 247. Think win-win is the habit of interpersonal leadership. It involves the exercise of each of the human endowments, self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will, our relationships with others, in our relationships with others. It involves mutual learning, influence, and benefits. It takes great courage as well as consideration to create these mutual benefits, especially if you're so used to thinking win-lose, like I'm going to win, they're going to lose. Why this habit involves principles of interpersonal leadership. Effective interpersonal leadership requires the vision, the proactive initiative, the security, guidance, wisdom, and power that come from a principle-centered approach. The principle of win-win is fundamental to success in all our interactions. It embraces 5 interdependent dimensions of life. It begins with character and moves towards relationships, out which flow agreements. It's nurtured in an environment where structure and systems are based on win-win. So he shows this diagram of triangles here. So 5 dimensions relate. So right here, you guys can see, you can pause it for a sec or whatever. So he talks about, just by the book, he talks about win-win character leads to win-win relationships, leads to win-win agreements. And it's based on supportive systems and processes. So he wants to consider each dimension on its own. So character, this is page 1 of 2. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Character is the foundation of win-win. Everything else builds on that foundation. Okay, so I'm going to read this first. So essential traits are found within win-win. So integrity, the value placed on ourselves. Identify values, proactively organize actions daily. So it's like keeping commitments to yourself. And that your actions are in line with your goals and your decisions. Develop self-awareness and independent will by making and keeping agreements to yourself and others. Know what is a win relative to one's values. That's why habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is important. Maturity, balance between courage and consideration through confidence and empathy. So courage is saying what you need. Consideration is having empathy for what others need. So I need others to be considerate, and I need confidence in my own needs to tell other people. So he gives an example of sexennion, the ability to express one's own feelings and convictions, balanced with consideration for the thoughts and feelings of others. I think that's his definition of maturity, which is different than the maturity continuum, which is based on growth and development from being dependent to independent to interdependent. So this definition of maturity is more about like empathy, right? Which is essential to win-win, empathetically understand, and then courageously confront. Slide 2 is, so this is based on the abundance mentality, that there's lots for everybody, which also shows personal worth and security. The scarcity mentality, that script, is a zero-sum paradigm. So someone wins, other person loses, which is based on comparing or competition. Character is essential for public victory to be successful, to have effective interactions with mutually beneficial results for everyone involved. All right, so let's go to the text, 248. Character is the foundation of win-win. Everything else builds on that foundation. 3 character traits are essential to the win-win paradigm. So those 3 traits are integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality. So integrity, 248. We define integrity as the value we place on ourselves. Habits 1 to 3 help us develop and maintain integrity. Identify our values and proactively organize and execute around those values on a daily basis. We develop self-awareness and independent will by making and keeping meaningful promises and commitments. There's no way to go for a win in our lives if we don't even know what constitutes a win. What is harmonious with our innermost values? If we can't make and keep commitments to ourselves as well as to others, our commitments become meaningless. Others know it. They sense duplicity and become guarded. No foundation of trust, and win-win becomes an effective superficial technique. Integrity is the cornerstone in the foundation. So that's integrity. The second attribute of character is maturity. Maturity is the balance between courage and consideration. So this is from Sextinian. The definition of emotional maturity I'll repeat it again. The ability to express one's own feelings and convictions, balanced with consideration for the thoughts and feelings of others. Horan's use of the word maturity is different from the use in the 7 Habits of Maturity Continuum, which focuses on growth and development processes from dependency through independency to interdependency. The psychological tests used for hiring, so at the time of writing this book, promoting and training purposes, designed to evaluate this kind of maturity, page 249. So again, this is not what organizational psychologists would use today, but ego strength, empathy balance, self-confidence, respect for others, concern for people, concern for task balance, in the transactional analysis language, balance, what I call, is the same thing as what he calls courage and consideration. Respect for this quality is deeply ingrained in the theory of human interaction, management, and leadership. Deep embodiment of the production capability balance. Courage may focus on getting the golden egg. Consideration deals with the long-term welfare of other stakeholders. The basic task of leadership is to increase the standard of living and the quality of life for everybody. So he gives this like chart of lose, win, lose, lose, win, lose, win. So right here, you can see it on page 249. And so you need to have high consideration and high courage for win-win. People think in dichotomies, either or terms, page 250. To achieve that balance between courage and consideration is the essence of real maturity and is fundamental to win-win. If I'm high on courage and low on consideration, how will I think? Win-lose, strong and ego-bound. The courage of my convictions won't be very considerate of yours. To compensate for my lack of internal maturity and emotional strength, I may borrow strength from my position and power, like seniority or credentials. If I'm high on consideration and low on courage, I'll think lose-win. Be so considerate of the other person, their convictions and desires, I won't have the courage to express and actualize my own. High courage and consideration are both essential to win-win. Balance that is the mark of real maturity. Empathetically understand, courageously confront. Okay, the last property of character in this win-win context is the abundance mentality. The third character trait essential to win-win is the abundance mentality, the paradigm that there's plenty out there for everybody. The scarcity mentality, in contrast, sees life as having only so much, as though there were only one piece out there of the pie. If someone were to get a big piece of the pie, it would mean less for everybody else. The scarcity mentality is a zero-sum paradigm of life. The scarcity mentality people with that have a very difficult time sharing recognition and credit, power, or profit. Hard time being genuinely happy for the success of other people. Sometimes members of their own family or close friends and associates, almost as if something is being taken away from them when someone else receives special recognition or they get remarkable success or achievement. They're envious. It's not good. Might be verbally express happiness for others' success. Inwardly, they're upset. The sense of worth comes from being compared to others, and someone's success means that they are failing. So that downwards or upward social comparison. People with a scarcity mentality harbor 251 secret hopes that others might suffer misfortune. Acceptable misfortune to keep them in their place, always comparing, always competing, give their energies to possessing things or other people in order to increase their sense of worth. They want other people to be the way they want them to be, want to clone them and surround themselves with yes people, won't challenge them, people who are weaker than they. Yeah, this is again scarcity people that are manipulating others, using them as a means to an end. Difficult for people with a scarcity mentality to be members of a complementary team. Look on differences as signs of insubordination or disloyalty. The abundance mentality, in contrast, flows out of a deeper sense of personal worth and security. Paradigm that there's plenty out there and enough to spare for everybody. Results in sharing of prestige, recognition of profits, of decision-making, opens possibilities, options, alternatives, and creativity. The abundance mentality takes the personal joy, satisfaction, and fulfillment of habits 1 to 3, turns it outward, appreciating the uniqueness, inner direction, and proactive nature of others, recognizes the unlimited possibilities for positive interactive growth and development, creating alternatives than the either or false dichotomy. Public victory does not mean victory over other people. It means success and effective interaction that brings mutually beneficial results to everyone involved. Public victory means working together, communicating together, making things happen together that even the same people couldn't make happen working on their own. An outgrowth of the abundance mentality paradigm. A character rich in integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality has a genuineness that goes far beyond technique or lack of it in human interaction. Helpful to win-lose people in developing a win-win character is to associate with some model or mentor who really thinks win-win. Sometimes the deeply scripted win-lose, we don't see opportunity in our experiences with the win-win perspective. 252. If we search deeply enough within ourselves, beyond the scripting, beyond the learned attitudes and behaviors, the real validation of win-win can be seen in our own lives.
Questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to play a devil advocate. So win-win. How do we achieve? If it's possible? For example, the U.S. debate on abortion.
Yeah.
Two groups, fighting each other. How do we achieve win-win situation? Like abortion, just one example. There's many examples that split the U.S. apart.
Yeah.
In many areas, right? So you see the debate, between those two, they debate on almost everything. How do we achieve win-win? For example, like abortion.
Well, he gives us the example as like what he says is there's win-win or no deal. And sometimes when your goals or values are completely contradictory, it's better to go for no deal. And so that's why there's two parties and we have to vote on them. They're not one party, right? Because there's certain goals or values that are just contradictory.
Because they're talking about win-win, the best work in the when people are interrelated.
Yeah.
Right? Because it doesn't matter you support abortion or against, we still live in the same society.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they're my neighbors, maybe, even within the family member also have, I heard, they even fight each other because they have different views on this. So I just wondering, like social issues like this, or like many others, how do you, it seems very difficult to achieve that win-win situation. It's just
well, again, that's where the next
negotiation
at the end of this chapter. The next habit is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. So first you need to know your own self, right? That's habit 2. Yeah. Right. And then you need to understand other people, right? It's not making them understand you. It's you understand yourself and then you understand them. And then you try to find a way to develop like a mutually beneficial agreement. But if you can't, like I said, if someone's goal is to kill you, then no deal. I'm not interacting with you in that way, right? I'm gonna interact in a different way. Like it's like, yeah, interaction in this formulation between people only happens between persons. Almost like in a self-defense situation, the other person is not really a person anymore. They're just an object that is dangerous, like a saw blade coming towards you. I'm not like going to argue with the saw blade about its cutting capacity. I'm going to move out of the way, or I'm going to smash it with a stick. So if someone's fist is coming at you, it's like, whoa, or knife or something like that. It's not really like you're not being a person. You're being a violent object with intention. We're not at the same level here because you're not looking at me as a person. You're looking at me as an object to be hit. So then fine, I'm going to reflect that onto you and defend myself. And we have a right to do that. So, in some context, they do not like the values or the goals are contradictory. And so you go no deal, and then it may be self-defensive in some ways, in the political context, they become different parties and we have to vote for them.
When do you know it's a no deal or when do you know it's a moment of no deal? How do you know that?
Let's get to the end because we're going to talk about negotiation. And so it's in there. The answer's there. There's two areas where we can
find because it's quick.
Yeah. Okay, relationships. So we're going to talk about this first, and then we'll go to the book. So it's the first slide of 2. Emotional bank account trust is the essence of win-win. Sometimes I'm tired when I'm here. It's true. I feel better today. I'm getting shit done. It's necessary, the emotional bank account or trust, for credibility, mutual learning, communication, and creativity. So this is the second stage of this win-win context. First is character, then the relationships, 2 characters together, and then we're going to have agreements. They're going to produce something. So in this relationship, they're committed to understanding each other's point of view, which is habit 5. They work towards a third alternative, a synergistic solution, which is habit 6. They cooperatively understand issues to resolve them in a mutually beneficial way. So that's what they're doing. So the example, what if the other person is win-lose? So this is what you've said. So what you do is you focus on your circle of influence. You make deposits in the emotional bank account with courtesy, respect, and appreciation. You listen more and in greater depth and communicate courageously. You're still assertive in what's going on, and you act proactively, which means that you're deciding what your response will be in that situation, not reactively. And this is how you're engaging. And so hopefully they will start to reciprocate or mirror you, right? So there's an interpersonal leadership test. You want to go from a transactional to a transformational relationship. We're investing in our character, and the relationship is the base to sustain agreements. So you being good in yourself and having a healthy relationship with the other person will make the agreement follow through. Let us look at the text. Page 252. From the foundations of character, we build and maintain win-win relationships. The trust, the emotional bank account is the essence of win-win. Without trust, the best we can do is compromise. Without trust, we lack the credibility for open, mutual learning and communication and real creativity. If our emotional bank account is high, credibility is no longer an issue. Enough deposits have been made so that you know and I know that we deeply respect each other. Because we trust each other, even though we see things differently, I know that you're willing to listen with respect, and you know that I'll treat your description with the same respect. We're both committed to try to understand each other's point of view deeply and to work together for a mutually beneficial option.
That sounds like a secret to happy marriage.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Tell your friend when they come back.
Relationship, marriage is a relationship.
Read that point to your friend when she gets back from her vacation. A relationship where bank accounts are high. It's okay, I'll tell you later. It was a joke. She would be mad at me. She's like, shut it.
All right.
Yeah, it is. Okay, relationship where bank accounts are high and both parties are deeply committed to win-win is the idea springboard for tremendous synergy. Habit 6. The relationship that makes the issues any less real or important, neither makes the issues any less real or important, nor eliminates the differences in perspective. It does eliminate the negative energy normally focused on differences in personality and position, and creates positive, cooperative energy focused on thoroughly understanding the issues and resolving them in a mutually beneficial way. What if the kind of relationship isn't there? What if you have to work out an agreement with someone who hasn't even heard of win-win, and they're deeply scripted in win-lose or some other philosophy? Dealing with win-lose is the real test of win-win. Rarely is win-win easily achieved in any circumstance. Deep issues and fundamental differences have to be dealt with. It's much easier when both parties are aware of and committed to where there is a high emotional bank account in the relationship. 253. Dealing with a person who is coming from a paradigm of win-lose, the relationship is still key. The place to focus it on is your circle of influence. Make deposits in the emotional bank account through genuine courtesy, respect, and appreciation for that person and for the other point of view. You stay longer in the communication process. You listen more, you listen in greater depth, you express yourself with greater courage. You aren't reactive. You go deeper inside yourself for strength of character to be proactive. You keep until the other person begins to realize that you genuinely want the resolution to be a real win for both of you. That very process is a tremendous deposit in the emotional bank account. The stronger you are, the more genuine your character, the higher level your proactivity, the more committed you really are to win-win, the more powerful your influence will be with the other person. The real test of interpersonal leadership, it goes beyond transactional leadership into transformational leadership, transforming the individuals involved as well as the relationship. Win-win is a principle people can validate in their own lives. You will be able to bring most people to a realization that they will win more of what they want by going for what you both want. There will be a few who are so deeply embedded in the win-lose mentality that they just won't think win-win. No deal is always an option, or you may occasionally choose to go for the low form of win-win, compromise. It's important to realize that not all decisions need to be win-win. Even when the emotional bank account is high, the key is the relationship. If you and I work together, so for example, I know you won't like this decision. I don't have time to explain it to you. There's a good possibility you think it's wrong, but will you support it? If someone says that and you have a high emotional bank account with them, then you're more likely to support it. We'll work to make the decision work. But if the emotional bank account, i.e. trust, is not there, then You risk the other person becoming reactive and not supporting it. 254. If I were overreactive, I might torpedo your decision. I might become maliciously obedient and do exactly and only what you tell me to do, accepting no responsibility for the results. Covey was in Great Britain, and he saw the country brought to his knees because train conductors were maliciously obedient and following all the rules and procedures written on paper. An agreement means very little in letter without the character and relationship base to sustain it in spirit. We need to approach win-win from a genuine desire to invest in the relationships that make it possible.
Okay. Say a little bit more about what is that emotional bank account?
Yeah.
What is that, and how do I increase that account?
So it's things you do for the other person that is meaningful to the other person. So we talked about this last.
I'm spending time with them.
Yeah, spending time with them. Like, for example, if you say, I'm going to take you to the movies, or I'm going to take you out tonight, and you say this to me, and then we get there and it's like a hockey game. I'm going to be like, or a baseball game. I'm going to be like, I really don't. Like, I appreciate that there's excitement and a bunch of people here, but I personally don't value sports. We're going to go golfing, Achilles. I'd be like, oh, okay, you have fun. Right? I'd rather just go sit in a forest by myself. I'll be outside. I don't want to play golf. Right? So it has to matter to the person. Or it has to mean something to them. It has to generate positive emotions in them by you doing it.
But you're sacrificing yourself.
You don't have to. You can do something that's good for both of you. Sometimes maybe, right? You're not really sacrificing yourself. It's just like when I gave the example last week of the dad who took the kids to the sports games, right? That was very meaningful, and that memory lasted forever for the kid, right? And he said, it's not that I like baseball, it's that I like my kid that much. That was the example they gave.
So is it a lose-win?
It might be, and in that context, maybe that's appropriate just to build it. It's like a scaffolding. I accept a short-term loss for a long-term gain. Okay, agreements. So this is the final step of the win-win social relations. First is character. 2 is relationships. 3, out of that healthy relationship, that we make an agreement. So relationships define and direct agreements. Win-win shifts the paradigm of productive interaction from top-down hierarchical to horizontal. We become self-supervised, be clear and manage our expectations with interdependent relationships. Elements of win-win agreements. So there's 5 things. 1 is we have desired results. What is the goal and deadline? So we communicate this in our agreement. Number 2 is guidelines. What are the parameters or principles determining when the results are reached? So we make this very clear between us. Resources. Identify human, financial, technical, and organizational support. So what do we need? Need to make this agreement fulfilled. Accountability. Standards of performance for evaluation. We agree on what those standards are going to be. And consequences. The result of the evaluation produces what outcomes? What are we looking for in the end? So 3 of 3. The initial understanding and agreement creates a standard to measure our success. So now we both have a way to measure when we're successful or not. So he gives the example of an authoritarian supervision. Win-lose paradigm overdraws the emotional bank account, whereas a win-win paradigm helps with the accountability reports that, in this case, it's salespeople. I think it's the salespeople in this case, if people agree on how they're being evaluated, they're more likely to be accountable to that evaluation. It enables others to develop their own judgment. Have I met this criteria yet? And the development of them being able to discern in contrast to only observation and measurement. Can they have judgment themselves, or do we have to do performance evaluations and have somebody else make sure you're doing your job? Or can you tell on your own, right? And this goes back to in Put First Things First, when he talks about good management is delegation, getting other people to manage themselves. And so in that, he makes an agreement with the people of how they're going to manage themselves. And he gives the example of his kid. The lawn has to be green and clean, right? Okay, page 254. Which isn't even that long. That was 3 slides for this one thing. Okay, agreements. From relationships flow the agreements that give definition and direction to win-win. Sometimes called performance agreements or partnership agreements. Paradigm of productive interaction from vertical to horizontal, from hovering supervision to self-supervision, positioning to being partners in success. Win-win agreements cover a wide scope of interdependent interaction. The delegation in the green and clean example with his son. The same 5 elements we listed there provide the structure for win-win agreements between employers and employees, between independent people working together on projects, between groups of people cooperatively focused on a common objective, companies and suppliers, between any people who need to interact to accomplish something. They create an effective way to clarify and manage expectations between people involved in any interdependent endeavor. The win-win agreement. Following 5 elements are made very explicit. So these are the 5 things we mentioned. Desired results. Identify what's to be done and when. Guidelines. Specify the parameters, principles, policies within results, which results are to be accomplished. Resources. Identify the human, financial, technical, organizational support available to help accomplish the results. 255. Accountability. Set up the standards of performance and the time of evaluation. Consequences. Specify good and bad, natural and logical, what does and will happen as a result of the evaluation. These 5 elements give win-win agreements a life of their own. A clear mutual understanding and agreement upon upfront in these areas creates a standard against which people can measure their own success. Traditional authoritarian supervision is a win-lose paradigm, result of an overdrawn emotional bank account, like telling people what to do, dictating, right? They don't have trust or a common vision of desired results. Hover over, check up on, direct, micromanaging. Trust isn't there. You feel as though you have to control people. If the trust account is high, what is your method? As long as you have an upfront win-win agreement and they know exactly what's expected, your role is to become a source of help and to receive their accountability reports. More ennobling or empowering to the human spirit to let people judge themselves than to judge them. In a high trust culture, it's more accurate. Many cases, people know in their hearts how things are going much better than the records show. Discernment is often more accurate than either observation or measurement. Sometimes, yeah.
This agreement also can apply to marriage or partnership.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about
Yeah, of course.
But it sounds like I mean, you make an agreement with your partner before you enter a relation. That sounds very not romantic.
Well, I think that in a romantic sense, it kind of comes out as you're talking with each other. It's important to be explicit at certain moments. It's not like you're going to have like an introductory like meeting and discuss the outline of your relationship. You need to experience it, but at certain points, you say, well, what is your perspective on this? Like, what do you expect out of me? Right?
What's your perspective? Wow, that's very not romantic. Oh, you bring someone to a restaurant. Oh, where's the goal of our relation? What do you expect? What's your expectation on me?
It's not meant to be. It's like, again, so if you have a plant with a flower,
Yeah.
you need the pot to hold the soil in, right? The pot isn't the beautiful part of this, table piece. It's the flower, right? It's the orchid, but it comes in this like ugly pot. I don't care about the pot. The pot is a functional thing that helps support the aesthetic thing. And so in a relationship, sometimes we need to have functional interaction to ensure the integrity or safety of the relationship. That's just what, or otherwise you're just going to get into fights. And is that romantic? I don't know. I think it's like,
Is it a philosopher's version of partnership? That sounds very rational.
I'm saying that but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Like Romeo and Juliet, they never sit down together and talk about what's your expectation on me, Juliet.
And then they end up killing themselves. So maybe if they talked about stuff and made a plan, they wouldn't have ended in that tragedy.
Okay.
All right. So next we are looking at win-win management training. So we'll go a little bit more and then I'm gonna finish this chapter next week. So example, the bank management team training program. We need a clear picture of desired results. The existing program focused on methods, not results. The learner controlled, so they had this retail store or whatever, and the managers were like poaching. They were just like taking all the customers when it was slow, and then the reports reflected that the managers were doing the best. It was because they were just taking out customers. It wasn't representative of what was really going on. And so Covey, when they did consulting for this group, they discussed a learner-controlled instruction. So he says, identifying specific objectives and criteria that would demonstrate their accomplishment and identifying the guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences, the result when the objectives were met. The promotion given once an individual meets specific criteria. Sorry, this is a different one. This is the training thing. So in this one, they had like a bunch of people that they were training and they wanted to optimize the training. And so they used the learner controlled instruction where the students determined how they were going to do their training, and they just got it done way faster. And they were more trained than the alternative instruction model. Yeah, okay, so let's just read it. Sorry. 255. So consulting a project, very large banking institution, want us to evaluate and improve their management training program. It was like $750,000. The program involves selecting college graduates and putting them through a 12 two-week assignments over a 6-month period to get a general sense of the industry. Spent 2 weeks on commercial loans, industrial loans, marketing operations, etc. At the end of the 6-month period, they were assigned as assistant managers in the branches of the banks. So their assignment for Covey was to evaluate the 6-month formal training period. He discovered that the most difficult part of the assignment was to get a clear picture of the desired results. 256. We asked the top executives the key hard question: what should these people be able to do when they finish the program? The answers were vague and contradictory. The training program dealt with methods, not results. So Covey suggested they set up a pilot training program based on a different paradigm called learner-controlled instruction. It was a win-win agreement that involved identifying specific objectives and criteria that would demonstrate their accomplishment and identifying the guidelines, resources, accountability, and consequences that would result when the objectives were met. So yeah, that's like the most important part there. The consequences were being promoted to assistant manager, and they would receive on-the-job part of their training and a significant increase in salary. So they had to press to get the objectives hammered out. So what is it you want them to understand about accounting, marketing, real estate loans? More than 100 objectives were simplified, reduced, and consolidated until we came down to 39 specific behavioral objectives with criteria attached to them. Trainees were highly motivated by both the opportunity and the increased salary to meet the criteria as soon as possible. The big win for them, the big win for the company was because they would have an assistant branch manager who met the results-oriented criteria instead of just showing up for 12 activities. So they wanted to make sure that they actually were getting training out of this program and not just showing up every day and not actually, the training wasn't working. So we explained the difference between learner-controlled instruction and system-controlled instruction to the trainees. Here are the objectives and the criteria. Here's the resources, including learning from each other. As soon as you meet the criteria, you'll be promoted to assistant managers. They are finished in 3.5 weeks. Shifting the training paradigm had released unbelievable motivation and creativity. As with many other paradigm shifts, there was resistance. Almost all of the top executives wouldn't believe it. Even when they were shown evidence that the criteria had been met, they said the trainees don't have the experience. They lacked seasoning necessary to give them the kind of judgment we need. 257. And talking with them later, we found that many of them were really saying, we had to go through a hard time. How come these guys get it so easy? We couldn't put it that way. So they said they lacked seasoning instead. There was another reason why they got objections, that the company was currently spending $750,000 on a 6-month program. And so the personnel department was upset. We responded, let's develop some more objectives and attach criteria to them. Let's stay within the paradigm of learner-controlled instruction. They hammered out 8 more objectives that were very tough criteria in order to give the executives the assurance that people were adequately prepared to be an assistant branch manager and continue on the job part of the training. After participating, several of the executives remarked that if the trainees could meet these tough criteria, they would be better than almost anyone who'd gone through the 6-month program. They prepared the trainees to expect resistance. When they brought the trainees the additional objectives and criteria, they said management wants you to accomplish some additional objectives that are even tougher than before. If you meet these criteria, they will make you assistant managers. They went to work in unbelievable ways. Went to the executives in departments such as accounting and basically said, I know you're a member of this new pilot program. I'm a member of this new pilot program called Learner Controlled Instruction. It's to my understanding that you participated in developing the objectives and criteria. I have 6 criteria to meet. I've already done 3 on my own. I only have 1 more to go. And can you help me figure it out? If you or someone else in the department might be able to spend a few hours with me to show me how to do it. So they spent half a day instead of 2 weeks. Trainees cooperated with each other, brainstormed, accomplished the additional objectives in a week and a half. The 6-month program was reduced to 5 weeks, and the results were significantly increased. This kind of thinking can affect every area of an organizational life, 258, if people have the courage to explore their paradigms and to concentrate on win-win. He's amazed at the results, both to individuals and organizations. Responsible proactive, self-directing individuals are turned loose on a task. Okay, so that's half of win-win, a little bit more than half. So I don't want to do too much because sometimes I start to fucking not read well. I'm like, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, you did.
It's got to be comprehensible.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to finish habit 4. That'll take us to page 271. And then after that, we're going to do habit 5. Or we're going to do a movie soon. I got 2 movies to show. One is called Waking Life. Large philosophical endeavor to get through that movie. I've watched it like 20 times. 30 times.
Waking time.
Waking Life. And the
Waking
other one
Life.
is called I Heart Huckabees. So yeah, that's on the chart for things to do. I don't really have anything prepared for that, where there's discussion time. So yeah. So we'll see you guys next week.